What if a soldier's silence hid a story that could move an entire nation to tears? When Edward Harrington, a stoic royal guard from Buckingham Palace, stepped onto a talk show stage thousands of miles from home, no one expected what was about to unfold. Not the host, not the audience, not even Edward himself, but behind the buttons, beneath the bear fur cap, was a brother, a soldier, a man carrying the final letter of someone who never came home. This is not just a story about duty. It's a story about love, sacrifice, and the unexpected power of laughter in the darkest of places. So before we begin, make sure to hit that subscribe button, give this video a thumbs up, and comment below where you're watching from, because this story will stay with you long after the screen fades to black. When Steve Harvey announced his next guest, the crowd responded with curiosity more than anticipation. After all, how often does a British royal guard appear on an American daytime talk show? But as Edward Harrington stepped onto the stage, resplendent in his scarlet tunic and towering bearskin cap, the mood in the studio shifted. His posture was impeccable, his movements deliberate. The theater, once filled with easy laughter, fell into respectful silence. There was something commanding about Edward's presence, something that transcended novelty or costume. Several veterans in the audience instinctively stood or saluted. A woman whispered, "He looks like he walked out of history." Edward's quiet dignity transformed the talk show set into something almost ceremonial. For older viewers, it was a reminder of values once held sacred: discipline, decorum, duty. Steve Harvey, known for his humor, paused longer than usual before speaking. This wasn't just another interview, it was a moment that called for reflection. And though no one in the audience quite knew why yet, they could feel it. This man had a story worth listening to, and it would move them in ways they never expected. Most people assume that being a royal guard is simply a matter of standing still and looking stoic. But, as Edward Harrington explained to Steve Harvey, the truth is far more profound. Every morning begins at 4:30 a.m., with hours of preparation before he ever steps out in uniform. The scarlet tunic, gleaming buttons, polished boots, and towering bearskin cap aren't just ceremonial garb. They are the product of daily discipline and meticulous care. As Edward described it, this isn't just dressing, it's a ritual. It's tradition made visible. He explained how the smallest details matter. Brass buttons must reflect light like mirrors, the cap must be brushed to precise standards, and even the white belts are treated with special chalk compounds. This preparation isn't vanity. It's about honor. When we stand before the palace, we don't represent ourselves, Edward said. We represent centuries of service. Standing motionless in rain, wind, or sweltering sun isn't merely about stoicism. It's a display of endurance and commitment. Some guards faint from heat exhaustion, but even that, Edward noted, is trained. We fall forward, like a tree, he said, so we do not lose our posture, even unconscious. The studio, normally filled with laughter and chatter, grew still as he spoke. This wasn't a costume, it was a code. Edward's voice never wavered, but something deeper resonated beneath his words. For older viewers, it was a reminder of the kind of discipline once expected in military service, in civic duty, and in life. It was a tribute not only to tradition, but to the quiet strength required to uphold it, especially when no one seems to notice. As the interview deepened, so too did the audience's understanding of the man behind the uniform. Edward Harrington wasn't just a royal guard performing ceremonial duties in front of Buckingham Palace. He was, first and foremost, a soldier. With quiet dignity, he revealed that before his current post, he had completed 3 tours in Afghanistan and 1 in Iraq. This revelation came as a surprise to many. Most people associate royal guards with strict posture, stoic silence, and elegant pageantry, but few realize that many of them are battle-hardened veterans. Edward spoke not of heroics, but of reality. He described the everyday rhythms of war, long hours of patrol, the careful observation of subtle changes in local behavior, and the weight of vigilance that soldiers must carry even when nothing seems to be happening. He recounted building a school with local elders, coordinating with medics to ensure safe vaccine delivery, and helping protect villagers from threats both visible and hidden. He didn't dramatize his service. Instead, he grounded it in the quiet, steady work of peacekeeping and presence. Most of the job isn't what you see in movies, he said. It's waiting, watching, listening, being ready. The shift from combat zones to ceremonial posts might seem jarring, but Edward explained that the foundation remains the same: discipline, honor, and service to something larger than oneself. Whether on a battlefield or standing post at the gates of royalty, he brings the same integrity to the task. For the older members of the audience, many of whom had served or knew someone who had, his words struck a deep chord. Beneath the brass and ceremony stood a man of duty, forged not by theatrics, but by experience, sacrifice, and unwavering resolve. During the break, Steve Harvey noticed a subtle shift in Edward Harrington's composure. When the cameras resumed rolling, Edward gently asked if he could share something deeply personal. From the inside of his impeccably tailored tunic, he retrieved a worn photograph. Two young men in desert combat gear, arms around each other, smiling in the harsh sunlight of Afghanistan. One was Edward. The other, he explained quietly, was his younger brother, Thomas Harrington, a Royal Marine. Thomas was more than a soldier. According to Edward, he was a natural leader, a bringer of light in dark places. With 4 tours of duty in Afghanistan, Thomas had seen more than his share of conflict. Yet, he remained cheerful, always finding ways to lift the spirits of those around him. Afghan children knew him as the Candy Soldier, a nickname earned because he defied regulations to carry sweets in his uniform pockets. He believed small kindnesses could build trust, Edward said, and in many cases they did. But one day that light was extinguished. Thomas was killed in action during a patrol near Helmand province, just 3 years earlier. Edward received the news while standing post at Buckingham Palace. His commanding officer, breaking strict protocol, came in person to relieve him. That moment, Edward said, told him everything he needed to know. As he spoke, his voice steady but his eyes distant, the audience leaned in. Many wiped away tears. This was no longer just a story about military service. It was about love, loss, and brotherhood. For those who had experienced grief or knew the silence that follows a folded flag, Edward's words held a painful familiarity. His loss became theirs. His brother's memory, shared on that stage, became a symbol of quiet courage. With great care, Edward Harrington unfolded a letter that bore the creases of time and reverence. It was the final note sent home by his younger brother Thomas, delivered 3 days after the family had been informed of his death. "Dear family," it began, in neat handwriting. What followed was not a detailed account of military operations, but a glimpse into the emotional heart of soldiers stationed far from home. In the letter, Thomas described organizing what his unit affectionately called Steve Harvey Nights. These informal gatherings took place in the barracks after difficult missions where exhausted men and women huddled together around a laptop to watch old recordings of Steve's stand-up routines. For 30 minutes, as Thomas wrote, we weren't soldiers in a war zone. We were people, laughing, remembering who we are beneath the uniform. He went on to say that Steve Harvey's humor provided something rare and deeply healing, a sense of normalcy, of shared humanity. Even their commanding officer, initially skeptical, changed his mind after hearing the laughter echo through the base one grim night. Laughter, Thomas wrote, pushes back the darkness. The studio audience sat silent, many visibly moved. Steve Harvey, usually so quick with a reply, found himself at a loss for words, tears forming in his eyes. The idea that his comedy could bring comfort in the harshest corners of the world was humbling, beyond measure. For viewers who have lived through war, hardship, or loss, the image of a young man finding hope and connection in laughter struck a tender chord. Thomas's final words in the letter reminded them all that in the darkest of times, it's the smallest lights, shared stories, a familiar voice, or a good laugh that mean the most. As the interview drew to a close, Edward Harrington stood with quiet purpose. The scarlet of his uniform seemed brighter under the studio lights, the brass buttons reflecting not only light, but the weight of tradition. He turned to Steve Harvey and asked with formality, "Permission to present you with something, sir?" From inside his tunic, Edward retrieved a small, weathered object, a military patch. Its edges frayed, its stitching faded, yet carried with the care one would offer a sacred relic. It had belonged to his brother, Thomas Harrington, who had worn it during 4 tours of duty with 40 Commando Royal Marines, one of the most decorated units in British military history. This patch, Edward explained, was with Thomas in the mountains of Helmand, through firefights and sandstorms. It was on his uniform the day he carried a wounded American soldier to safety under enemy fire. He earned the Military Cross for that act of valor. And yet, in our family tradition, it is not medals we pass down, but symbols of connection. Steve Harvey accepted the patch with a visible tremble in his hand, clearly moved by the honor. "Thomas never met you," Edward said softly, "but your words walked with him through the darkest places. In our tradition, that makes you family." The audience rose to their feet, not in applause, but in tribute. For many, it wasn't just a talk show moment. It was a ceremony of remembrance. In that quiet exchange between a grieving brother and an unsuspecting comedian, viewers saw the enduring power of gratitude. It was a reminder that sometimes the most meaningful honors are not given by governments, but by those who carry memory in their hearts and pass it on with reverence. As the studio lights dimmed and the cameras prepared to fade, the atmosphere remained reverent. What began as a light-hearted segment about an unusual job had transformed into something sacred, a moment of collective reflection. Edward Harrington, the silent sentinel from Buckingham Palace, had peeled back the layers of the ceremony to reveal the quiet courage beneath. And Steve Harvey, so often the voice of laughter, had become the vessel for an unexpected message of remembrance and gratitude. For many watching, particularly those who had lived through eras of war or known personal loss, this exchange struck a profound chord. The message was clear. Behind every uniform is a human story, one of duty, grief, and the bonds that endure beyond death. The stillness Edward spoke of was not mere performance. It was a form of devotion. It honored not only the crown, but the memory of his brother, and of all who had served and sacrificed. In a world that moves quickly and often forgets, this brief moment on a talk show reminded viewers of the values that sustain us: respect, honor, and shared humanity. And for just a while, entertainment became a memorial,